Right, okay. Where do you want to start today? Has anyone got anything they want to share or ask?
I do, Mike. I have a question on legislation.
Yeah.
Um, I've been, I don't know, practicing or doing legislation. And as I was listening to some of the teaching, um, I took some notes and trying to implement
Yeah.
some of it. And I'm not quite sure about when you step in, I guess you step through the cross and you go through the veil and into the realm of heaven, and then you see what is from that heavenly perspective, which will show you what needs to change.
Yeah.
I'm not quite sure what needs to change, or if there's something in you that needs to change that the Lord shows you at that time. And then I guess you walk that back through, and then you go into what was, and you stand in the figure eight, that infinity sign, the covenant sign in the heart of God. And then our spirit begins to embrace and receive what is not sin. And then you can see what God's will is without the filters. And you walk that out, and you walk it back through, back, and bring it back to the earth. Then you begin to work out what will be, and you operate in the earth in accordance with what was, and then you will establish that, and this will become history as you continue this eternal cycle of walking it back through each day.
Yeah.
So I'm not quite sure what to expect, what I'm looking for. You see what I'm saying? I took this off of the legislation teaching,
Yeah.
only just because I wanted to apply it. And why do you stand in the figure eight, the infinity sign, and can you explain some of this to me?
Yeah. Sure. Okay. Well, when it comes to legislation, what you're looking to do is to engage God's will, know what His purpose is from a perspective of eternity. So I do all that when I go. I mean, I step into heaven. I mean, this is after I've already engaged in intimacy and in my own spirit, open my spirit gate and engage God there. So I'm then having yoked myself to Him and joined myself to Him in intimacy. Then I may do lots of other things, but eventually I'll want to see what am I authorized to do today? What are my mandates for the day? Like Jesus, seeing what the Father's doing. So what are you doing, Father, today that my destiny will intersect with that, and I will outwork it in accordance with your will and purpose. So as I step in through the veil, I engage the cross in exchange. So I'm exchanging old for new, and I'm standing in righteousness. But what I then do is I present myself as a living sacrifice to Jesus, my high priest, and ask him to prepare me to serve today. So if there's anything that's in the way of me serving him, then I will ask him to bring revelation of that I might need to repent of or renounce, or even go to the courts and deal with as an accusation, whatever it might be. And that's generally, I do that every day, but he doesn't actually tell me everything every day. But I'm presenting myself like, not my will, but yours be done. Taking up the cross and following him, generally just presenting myself to him so that I can serve according to his agenda and not mine. I lay down my free will to receive his will, and in that process of a living sacrifice, you're asking him to search your heart, oh God, and see if there's any things in your heart, any anxious thoughts, any wicked way. You're really opening yourself up, and the picture is being skinned, being split open right down to bone and marrow, seeing the source of the motives of your heart, head removed. In other words, he's the government of our life. His government can then come on my shoulders, and my legs, I'm walking according to his path. So all that is just preparation, which, you know, used to take me a long time and now is quite a straightforward process because, you know, I've done it so much. But eventually I'm coming through the veil into the Ark of the Holy of the Holies and engaging the Ark. And that is where I'm looking to engage the will of God. By coming into alignment with him, receiving his will directly to me. It may be that my heart is open and he writes on the tablets of my heart. My food is to do the will of him who sent me. So that is the key aspect there of that. I just want to come into alignment. But I am aware that I'm looking from the outside in rather than from the inside out. So when I come before the presence of God and I begin to think about his name and manifest the whole Yod, Hey, Vav, Hey, and the lion, the ox, the eagle, the man, then the four faces of God, according to the order of Melchizedek, that's his aspects of his government that I need to operate in once I know what I'm called to do. And generally I'm coming to surrender, and then I'm looking to engage. And so I step into him. So I don't just look into him, I step into him, and now I'm in his name. I'm in the power of his eternity. I'm within him, and now I have access to beyond time and space. So now I have access to eternity. So that infinity sign, or that ancient path, is symbolic of I can go back into eternity as a priest where there was no sin, and stand and receive revelation in my spirit, not in my mind or my head, of my destiny, my mandate for the day, anything that I'm authorized to do from an eternal perspective without the hindrance of sin, of trying to work it out, figure it out. Now, it's an ancient path that I don't walk. It's not like I'm walking around a figure of 8, but what it represents is I can go back into eternity. I can go that ancient path into his heart, and in his heart everything is revealed, not cognitively, and I've gone beyond trying to figure out what's going on, into I'm presenting myself, here I am in how you see me, so I'm engaging my identity in how he sees me. I'm feeling and experiencing that. Anything that my destiny is calling me to do today, my spirit can engage, absorb, receive as revelation without sin. When I've received that, when I feel full, when I just feel overflowing, all sorts of ways I feel it, then I walk back, I come back in him, in time and space, and then I can then take that to my mountain, and I can begin to, and sometimes I would stand and speak out through the voice of the mouth of the lion, or the lion, the eagle, the ox, whatever, there. But generally I take my authorization, because now my spirit is empowered and has revelation of what to do. And I go to my mountain, and I then allow my spirit to lead. I may decree, declare, call things that be not, move mountains, change things, assign angels, go to the angelic court. I would go to lots of different places after that. But I have been in God's eternal heart, and now I have something of his heart. I've felt his heart. I've experienced his heart. And now I carry his heart, and now I can begin to administrate and legislate his heart, rather than my way of trying to interpret his heart, trying to figure out what I should do. I'm now spirit-led. My spirit is leading me. My spirit is active and operating. And as a living sacrifice, I'm able to outwork God's purpose for today. That starts with my own life. It may then go on to other mandates and things I've been authorized to do. So the infinity path, or the ancient pathway, just represents my ability to access the heart of God in eternity outside time and space, and then once I'm back in time and space, then I'm able to, because I'm now different and changed, operate according to that, and what will be different than if I ever went back into the heart of God, because now I'm different. The future will be different. That aspect of what I'm supposed to outwork in my destiny today will be outworked, and it will then align with what was. So at the end of the day, I want to know, does my scroll outwork my scroll of destiny? Have I got gold, silver, and precious stones on there? And then the end and the beginning meet. So I have actually outworked what was. That is now history and is actually established. How I many years ago, or even recently, I would have tried to work out what it is. I don't try and do that anymore. I don't try and operate in my soul there. I let my spirit receive, and I just decree, just do whatever I'm led to do. It's an instinctive outworking of carrying the heart of God and coming from an eternal perspective. I now have his precepts operating in me in that way. So I'm very much engaging to receive and then release what I've received. If you have direct, okay, God says there is something in your community that's going on and you're now authorized to deal with it, that's a direct mandate. But how I deal with it is what my spirit receives, because if I try and deal with it through my filters of sin in what is, I'm looking at it, I might be looking at the atmosphere of the earth, I may be looking thinking, whoa, look at all this stuff, what do I do? You know, how do I shift this? How do I move that? You know, what is supposed to change in my community? And I'm not in rest when I'm trying to work it all out. But when I go back into eternity and I now carry his heart unaffected by the filters, I just do. I don't try and figure it out. I just do, and I always record what I do, and so I have records of my declarations, my decrees, the things I have said, done, spoken, angels that I've sent. You know, you can then go and get a strategy from the strategy court of something specific if you need anything more, but you carry something of the heart of God in it rather than just our normal natural compassion, which may move us to act, but may not move us to act in accordance with what God's eternal purpose is. So that's really how it works. Once I've stepped into him, I have access to be in his heart. It's not like I'm figuratively walking into that place, but I'm not like physically walking, I'm just going there. It's like I'm accessing his heart in eternity, because it's open to me because I'm now in him, and I do that most days of my life, and I found it's made a huge difference and change in how I do things, and how effective the things I do are, because it's a reality that God has opened up for us. You know, that's the path that Adam had access to, you know, through the pathway of eternal life. You know, we're talking about that ancient pathway that we can now walk on and engage. A lot of people, you see, want to know what the future is so they can try and outwork the future. But what we need to know is what God's original purpose and plan is. Then that enables us to create the future. It's because the future has not been created as yet. We're responsible for creating it. Now, eventually, there will be no time, because time and space will not exist in the same way as they do now. But we still get to operate on the earth without sin, because it was created to contain sin. Time did not exist until the fall, you know, in the way it does now. So it's contained sin and contained Satan, And now, once it's dealt with, then we will operate without that time frame, but we will still do and engage and registrate and rule. And God, a lot of people think that we're going to go and live in heaven. No, heaven and earth will come back into complete overlap and agreement, and God comes to live with us. That's the end result in Revelation. God comes to dwell with man, not man coming to dwell with God. It was always God's intention that heaven and earth would be operating in the same spatial connection, if you like. It's difficult to sort of describe it because we're in the transition between the two. But Adam and Eve, heaven and earth were connected. The garden and Eden were connected dimensionally. There was no difference for Adam walking in his garden to walking in God's garden because they were connected. Now we have to step through into that realm so that this realm can come into alignment with that realm, and that's why we're going to legislate to bring heaven and earth into alignment. See, I think a lot of people, visions of heaven are just fleshly outworkings of their earthly expectations, so they want heaven to be like a playground of earth. It won't. And so a lot of visions of heaven are not actually what heaven's like at all. They're just people never letting go of their earthly clothes. They're just carrying on thinking about what heaven should be like from an earthly perspective. That's why you get people's visions having pizza parlors and fun rides and heaven's not like that at all. But people are seeing it that way because they're still operating in the outer court, never gone any deeper, and they're carrying with them their earthly expectations of what heaven is. So what we need to do is to actually engage heaven, which is engaging God's heart and engaging eternity and seeing an agreement between heaven and earth, where we're a gateway of heaven, and therefore we are to express heaven on earth around our lives and through our lives, but also to begin to establish the kingdom and how the kingdom functions and works in that way. Okay.
Mike?
Yeah.
You just answered my question, a court of strategy. I was in a place the other day, and that's what was going on in different groups. A strategic planning against movements of, just strategic planning in a lot of groups over, around this floor. And there was, I didn't recognize this being. I'm thinking maybe a chancellor, very tall, long robe, breastplate, and he just walked, he just kind of walked. It seemed like he was walking around this floor, platform. And I even, my group said, well, go ask who he is. And I started to go, and one of the men in white linen just gently, felt him gently pull me back. No, don't go. So I said, okay, I guess not. So it was really, you just answered, because I was going to ask you what this place may have been. I understand we all see differently and perceive things differently. I just found that in his name, for me, it's this tall glass tower over these waters that I've been in since 2005. The name of the Lord is a strong tower. And I just found out that the waters, he said, is the voice of many waters. So in his name, surrounded by the voice of many waters, I'm to decree things. It's just amazing. He's opening up so much these days.
Yeah. Awesome.
Is that, do you think, can you describe a chancellor? Does that make sense that a chancellor would be walking around this court where groups of people, beings, men in white linen were strategizing, and there were groups waiting to come on to the floor? Does that sound like something you've experienced?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, chancellors ultimately, we're supposed to be chancellors having charge of the courts. And so there are high chancellors, which are angelic beings that are responsible for the 12 chancellors' houses. And there are all sorts of things that goes on there, like the things you're describing. You know, there are things that are going on like that in the court of, the Chancellor's Court is more about when we go and things are presented to that court. But, chancellors are angelic beings, but also people. I operate in a chancellor's role at times and sit in the bench, and I reside over certain things because I'm learning how to take charge of the courts. There is that dimension to it, without a doubt. And the way you engage it and the way you see it and what you're experiencing will be designed for you to be able to understand what your part in it is. And other people may see it differently, but these activities go on. There are a lot of activity that goes on within the different courts and councils of God, which is procedural. Things are procedures. Some people have to wait, and some people have to, are being prepared, and some people bring things. And there have been times where I've been sat at the Chancellor's bench, and people have brought things, and they've been authorized. And there have been several times where I've been sat there with the other chancellors, and we've said, no, this isn't fully formed. You haven't got authorization here yet. Which is quite a strange thing to do, but I have done that because I just knew that someone was coming. They had a mandate, but it wasn't fully outworked or wasn't fully authorized in a sense. And then some people come and they bring stuff, and you just say, yeah, you're authorized to do that. And you seal it, and it's sealed, and then people can go and use that seal to get angelic assignments and other things. They're authorized. But a lot of people are learning, and there's a learning process. It takes me a long time sometimes to prepare a case to bring before a court, because I have to be able to do that in that way. But in all these things, the legislation and the government and establishing heaven on earth is great, but it must flow out of the relationship. I think so long as we're intimate and in relationship, that will lead us in the right direction. If we're trying to do things because there are a whole load of problems going on in our community, or there's a whole lot of things and we see, oh, we need to change this, and we're coming from it from looking at the problem rather than looking at the solution and seeing what his answer is, then we can do things, but we can do things sometimes out of our own compassion and out of our own desire rather than out of his desire, which is why things changed for me when I learned to go back into eternity, into his heart, and stand there and experience his heart and his thoughts and the energy and the life and everything that's there, and the light and all the wonderful thing that's there, both for myself, so that I could perceive and see myself and know myself from his eternal perspective, all that vast sum of the thoughts that he has about me, and also his perfect will, which my destiny is designed to outwork. And then I'm only responsible, of course, for my bit, And I think a lot of people look at their communities and sometimes go beyond the level of authority that's been given them. Just because you see a problem doesn't mean that you're authorized to deal with it. How long do I take on a daily basis? Not long, because when you step into eternity, you're not subject to time. So I can be, once you step into eternity, generally I'm spending in a morning in my own time with God a couple of hours, an hour and a half, 2 hours, just in intimacy, opening my first love gate, engaging him, going into eternity, just as my spirit leads. But when I go back into eternity, I'm not there for much more in an earthly time, generally not more than 10-15 minutes. But that's in eternity, there is no time, so what you receive is way more than God can speak to you in 15 minutes of time, because you're receiving it in your spirit, which is an eternal being. We are spirit beings of light, and when we engage with creative light in this realm, the encoded information that it contains, like for me, it's like the thoughts of God are exploding like firing neurons all around me. That's what it's like. It's just like a energetic, wonderful place, and my spirit engages with that. So light engages with light, and my spirit gets revelation encoded within it that then I just go and operate out of. It doesn't have to take a long time. I think years ago we'd be tarrying and praying for hours and all that stuff. I don't need to spend hours and hours, because I know what to do and I go and do it. But I am responsible for my own life. I don't have a lot of hassle in my life, because I rule that. So I send the angels out to protect me and prepare the way. I call for favor and blessing. I legislate and frame my life from eternity, from a heavenly perspective, so that the earthly perspective lines up. I don't deal with a lot of negative stuff. I have to deal with negative stuff in people and help them, but I don't get it myself. So I can't remember the last time I had a negative thought, because I just don't get them. No, I used to, but I've dealt with all the familiar spirits and everything else which were lying and promoting those thoughts, so I don't get them anymore. And sometimes you feel, wow, there's a lot of stuff going on here, and my reaction to that is, well, I can do all things in Christ who gives me strength. I always have truth to live by. I have more. God's grace is available, abounding and available in every situation and circumstances for me. So I've always got enough for all my needs and for all the good deeds that God has prepared me to do. So I have truth that I live by, that I do live by. So those would be two scriptures that are foundational to my life. There'll be three scriptures that are foundational. Nothing is impossible with God. I can do all things in God who gives me strength, and God's grace abounds at all times in all situations, so that I always have enough for all my needs and an abundance for every good deed. Now those three things, plus seeking first the kingdom and expecting him to do everything else, those I live by that. Therefore I'm not expecting hassle or things, because I'm decreeing what happens around my day to do with my life. If I come across other people, and I do frequently, who are not living in the same realm, and their stuff comes to the surface, then it does not affect me. I don't get affected by other people's stuff, because I'm not subject to that. No, it takes diligence to do it. I have to rule, but ruling's fun. It's not onerous. It's not like, oh no, I've got to go and rule again. It's like, it's great to be able to frame your own life and to have favor and blessing and love and joy and peace and all those wonderful things just living in. That's how I live. Now, it doesn't mean sometimes that I don't snap at my wife. Very, very occasionally might do, when she annoys me a lot, but but very, very rarely, because I just don't respond and react to those type of things very often. But I'm still on a journey. I still present myself as a living sacrifice every day, because I know I am not perfectly conformed to the image of Christ. There is still transfiguration that needs to take place in my physical body so that I can radiate glory. I still need transformation in the motives of my heart. But by and large, I've done a lot of work on it, And if I present myself to God every day, to Jesus, as a living sacrifice, and I ask him, look, if there's anything that's going to hinder me outworking your purpose today, then identify it so it can be removed, then I trust that he's going to do that. So if he doesn't tell me anything, then I just get on with it. If he does tell me something, then I have a procedure that I can use. Now, I take communion every day. I go into the temple and place my heart on the altar of fire so that all my DNA can be purified bit by bit every day. I do things to prepare my life to serve God. But it's not hard. It's a delight. Yes, it took discipline, but it's a delight. I want to spend time with God. I love being in the presence of God. Going into eternity and engaging his heart is a wondrous place to be, because it's just who you are, from an eternal perspective, not who I have been shaped and conformed by the world to be. And once my spirit it's like it's like looking at a reflection of what God says you are and seeing it. And once you carry the image, the pattern of it, in creative light, when your spirit then engages with your soul, you carry that frequency and your soul comes into alignment with it. It resonates with it because it's a greater authority and power. It's the truth. So anything in your soul which is actually a lie has to submit to the truth. Now, I don't need to do lie busting and things like that personally, because I can just engage in the truth, and it will challenge the lies, and a lot of that just falls away now. Whereas in the past I've done a lot of ministry and inner healing and all that sort of stuff in my own life, but now being with God really does effectively bring change and transformation. But I'm deliberate about presenting myself and allowing God and giving God total permission to do it. I don't want to hide or keep anything in the dark. I want to bring everything into the light. And if there are things which are hidden, because if I have a blind self that things I can't see, then that's what I'm coming and asking him to expose. The living sacrifices will skin me, take off all these layers so I can be transparent. Open me up right down to bone and marrow, which is the source of my genetic makeup. Reveal it all to me. Search me, O God, and know my heart. Try me and see if there's any anxious thoughts. See if there's any wicked way in me. And then what is it? Lead me in the everlasting way, which is I'm going to go back on that eternal path into God's heart in eternity and engage him there. But all of this, it's taken me a lot of time to get to this point, and there's a long way still to go. I'm sure, but I'm enjoying the journey. It isn't hard for me, because this is how I live. It's a lifestyle. So, when you've made a lifestyle choice and you live a certain way, then that's how you live, and that's how I've chosen to live. No, that doesn't mean I can't relax, have fun, do the gardening, watch sport. I do all those things. But my spirit is in heaven while I'm doing them all. It's still functioning and still active and still doing stuff. Even though my soul's having a really good time here, my spirit is also having a really good time engaging in heaven while I'm active here all the time. So I can live in dual realms. Which is why you can do so much more when you're able to do that. Because my spirit is legislating and doing things in the realms of heaven while I'm watching a football game. So I can have rest and relaxation and all the things that God has intended us to have in complete rest and peace without any guilt or shame or condemnation or fear or any of those things. Because I'm not doing it out of duty or because I'm obligated or because I've got a wrong view of God. If I don't do it, I'm going to be punished, and all those negative things that people live in religious bondage in. I love to serve God, and He loves to bless me and empower me to serve Him and to enjoy life. I enjoy life. I enjoy going on holiday. I enjoy doing things. When I went on holiday for 2 weeks recently, and it's like God said, you can have a total rest. You don't have to do anything for 2 weeks. I found it quite difficult to start with, because it was just like, no, you don't have to do anything. You can just have a complete rest. And and I really enjoyed it. Now, it didn't mean I wasn't engaged with God. He engages me in rest because my rest is in Him. I just didn't have to legislate for 2 weeks, because He told me not to. But I didn't like, oh no, what if I don't do that? What will happen? Because I trust Him. Well, it's taken time to get to trust Him. But now I do, and I feel He trusts me, and we can really enjoy everything. Yeah, there we go. Okay, yeah, if you want to share a testimony, that'd be great. Yeah.
Recently, there have been 2 hurricanes come in this direction. The first one was coming toward Florida, and I was sent in the Spirit to pray under the waters, and to pray that the churning be reversed. And that particular hurricane went out into the waters. Now, I didn't, it was just like, well, maybe it was, maybe I had an effect on that, maybe I didn't. I didn't really give it a lot of thought. But then this recent hurricane in Mexico, I was sitting on a bench out in my yard, and the thought was the furthest thing from my mind. I really don't have a burden for Mexico, but all of a sudden it was just like, you need to pray for that hurricane, regarding that hurricane. And so it's just like my spirit man, while I'm sitting on the bench, my spirit man just went under the waters again and just spoke to that current, the undercurrents, and I told it specifically, you will either dissipate, or I said you will reverse, and you will either dissipate or you will go where you will cause people no harm. And that is exactly what happened. And I know other people are praying, it's just not me, but that is exactly what happened. Is this hurricane went into the mountains, and there were no deaths, and it was a major hurricane. And just to be taken back in that area, it was like God confirmed to me, yes, you are having an effect on this. Yes, what you're doing is real. And it's just like, you don't really, I don't have the words. I can't tell you, okay, this is what I do. It was just, do it. And he honored my faith to obey.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, interestingly, when that hurricane came, I was at home looking at the pictures of it, and it was the biggest hurricane that they ever recorded. 200 odd mile-an-hour winds. I mean, it looked pretty horrendous when you looked at it on the weather maps. And as I was looking at it, I thought, actually, do I need to do something about this? So I said to God, do I need to do something about this? And He said, no, I've assigned other people to do it. So I think, great. So I had no doubt that hurricane was going to be dealt with, and it was. And by the time it actually got to land, it was turned from a Category 5 worst thing to a Category 2 tropical storm, which actually, as you say, went into an area that didn't affect anybody. It did have a little bit of effect on the Grand Prix in Austin, Texas. They had problems with their things, but again, it's actually only doing what you know that the Father's doing, and trusting Him. And I guarantee that you had an effect, because there were a lot of people praying in panic, desperately asking God to do something. And what he was doing was sending people like you to go and legislate. Because that's what he's doing in these days. He's calling people to legislate and to make the declarations and tell it to stop or turn, whatever, in accordance with what your spirit is leading you to do. Now, of course, we need to know what God's will and purpose is in it, because sometimes he uses some of the things in his purpose, but he's never obviously wanting to destroy people or to cause devastation. So it's really, but great. And I think that's exactly what we're looking to do and operate in. It doesn't matter whether anyone knows what we're doing. It's not like we have to set up this big prayer thing. We are this world prayer thing, and we just do it. He's just looking for ordinary people to listen to him and say, yeah, I'll go and tell that hurricane to stop. You know, and others who can say, great, God's going to send other people because he hasn't told me to do it. You know, I was willing, because I looked at that and thought, man, this could cause devastation if this hits, you know, large areas of, you know, population. And I was willing to go and do something about it, which I don't tend to get stirred, but I looked at it this time and thought, whoa, this really needs someone to deal with it. And God inspired you and others to deal with it. You know, for me, that's great. You know, and other people's cries of desperation, you know, were listened to by God, but it only takes one person to come into agreement and outwork what the mandate is, and you did that. There may have been others doing it. I know there were a lot of people praying. It's not prayer that we need, it's action to legislate, because we don't need to ask God to do something that he's given us authority to do, and that's great. And you know, having authority in the weather and in those situations, that's what some people have those mandates. You know, I generally don't. You know, it's not something that I have as a mandate to do that. I know other people do, and that's great. And we only need to be responsible for the things that we are called to do and are mandated to do. So it's great, really good testimony. And again, you know, a thing of what can happen when we start to administrate from heaven in the spirit to change things on the earth. So, yeah, awesome, very good.
It was a very good experience.
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, and it gives you then confidence, you know, because a lot of these things, it's like, oh, how does this work? You know, it's almost like, well, what good can that really do? I mean, those are sort of the thoughts that the enemy will try and bring in to try and think, oh, well, you're not really doing anything. And the reality is, those things we do in the realm of the spirit have enormous effect. You know, and I can remember when God said to me to do some things, and my first reaction was, how do I do that? And well, what will that do? And then it was like, no, I'll do it. And when I did it, even just saying something in the realm of heaven and a decree can have an enormous effect. And I've seen that personally in terms of testimonies of things I've said, things I've decreed, and then you immediately see and hear testimonies of that. I just don't tell people most of the time what it is, because it's not about people knowing what I've done. It's about it getting done. And you know, what we do is in sharing here is to encourage each other to say, hey, yeah, we've got a role to play in bringing heaven and earth into agreement and alignment and seeing the kingdom come, which is great, you know. So yeah, be encouraged, and I'm sure God's going to assign you many other things to do as well, which is great.
Yeah.
Yeah, awesome.
I've got a question.
Yeah, okay.
Can you expound on why am I echoing? On the 12-strand DNA?
Yeah, in terms of DNA, we were created in the image of God as a 3-stranded DNA creature, if you like. And as a result of sin, our third strand of DNA, the light strand, was separated, if you like, from the other two strands. When we get born again, that light strand gets reconnected and we become a three-stranded cord. So we are body, soul, and spirit, made in the image of God to reflect Him and His creativity. But it doesn't stop there, because Adam and Eve were sinless when they were created, and God breathed into Adam the breath of life. He became a living being, and then Adam began the lifestyle of engaging with God and framing the world according to his engagement. So God breathed into him, he breathed out. What did he breathe out? What God breathed into him. And then what did he do? He drew back from God and breathed in from God and then breathed out. So when he created, when he named the animals, he was breathing out the creative ability that God had placed into him, and the animals formed in accordance with the words that he spoke, which came from the thoughts that were in his heart. So that's a three-stranded. But when we look at the Word of God, we see that there are 9 stones, the 9 firestones, the 9 stones that covered Satan's body, or Lucifer's body as he was at the time. And those 9 stones reflected the 3 times 3 strands of God's DNA. So God has 3 strands for each. So Father, Son, Spirit, you have the 3 strands representing different aspects of things. Ian Clayton's teaching on it is, the Holy Spirit, righteousness, peace, and joy, and Jesus, the way, truth, and the life, and the Father, judgment, justice, and holiness. But there are other aspects. So you have the 9 fruit of the Spirit as well, which are reflected in Father, Son, and Spirit. And you have 9 there are other things, other levels of revelation on it. But Satan's role was to reflect that out into creation so that man would absorb the revelation of that and ascend into conformity to the image of God. And God is not 3 strands, he's 9 strands. And before the foundation of the world, we were predestined to be conformed to the image of God. And if they had not sinned, then they would have embraced the process of transformation. And in other religions, this has traditions about ascension, the 9 steps of ascension and all that stuff. It's just a twist on the truth, which was there would have been stages of ascension and conformity to the image of God as they learned to receive that revelation. Now, when we engage the firestones of God, we re-engage with those 9 stones, which are representing the 9 strands of DNA. Now, God in himself is perfect and complete in himself. That's why you get 9 being a complete number in itself. And it always adds up to itself. When you multiply 9s, they always make 9. So you have 2 9s are 18. The 18 is 1 plus 8 equals 9. 3 9s are 27. 2 plus 7, 9. 4 9s 36. 3 plus 6, 9. It's always 9. Always complete. But God has chosen to include man in his eternal purpose for government. And so he wants us to bring completion. And so on the high priest's breastplate, there were not 9 stones, there were 12, representing the 9 stones of God and the 9 strands of his DNA, and the 3 strands of our DNA that together forms the fullness of government that brings everything into order. And so you find that 3s and 4s work together in this. So you have the 3 of government and the 4 being the window. 3 times 4 is 12. It always works that way. You have the 12 chancellors' houses, and they work in sets of 3 and 4. And so these patterns are governmental patterns that God's established. So as we begin to engage God in intimacy, engaging on the firestones, we begin to take on, and the 9 strands, or Ian Clayton calls it being skinned with God, where carrying the being in the armor of God, the armor of righteousness, the armor of light, the armor of God. We begin to take on that image, and therefore when we engage on something like the dance floor of our heart, the DNA of God comes around us, and we begin to be transformed according to that image. When we take communion, we can engage with the DNA of God, and it begins to change our DNA and align us into that image. Now, we're not talking about physical strands of DNA, we're talking about light strands. And light is, God is light, God is spirit, God is love, contains information, it's energy, it's the thoughts of God. I mean, it's all encompasses who God is, that we engage with it, and then we become conformed to that image, and are actually not just operating as body, soul, and spirit, but we're operating in the fullness of, let's say, righteousness, peace, and joy, the way, the truth, and the life, just plus all the other things that are contained within the revelation of who God is and his eternal precepts. So it's an ongoing confirmation, being conformed to that image, not being conformed to the image of the world. And the problem is, obviously, we've been shaped and conformed to the image of the world. That's why Romans 12 says, don't be conformed to that image. So it's like within the 9 strands of God's DNA, it carries the full pattern of who we are. And when we come into agreement with it, then we take on that image and become like him, which is going to be really transformatory as we really embrace it, because we'll begin to reflect the light and express that through our lives. And you could say that that would be 9 rivers of living water flowing through us, because it says we have livers of, it's all that. You suddenly start to see the imagery to take on a flow of life that we were always intended to have, and now is being restored. I mean, I did hear Ian Clayton talking about recently that he was saying, well, eventually we'll have 40-odd strands of DNA. I'm like, 9 and 12 is quite enough, but who knows? There may well be other aspects or dimensional aspects of God that he wants to reveal. I certainly think Metatron's cube and the whole picture of how those things intersect is sort of a part of the understanding of this, but I'm sure we'll find out if that's the case as we engage with intimacy and continue the process. Every day, I take communion every day because I want to be conformed to that image, and I want my DNA. I don't want to carry the genealogy of my generational line. I want to be of the order of Melchizedek that has no generational line to affect my life, other than the generation which comes out of eternity. I want God's eternal pattern for my life to be expressed and to be outworked. So, yeah. I mean, I think God spoke to me in 2010, I think, and I was in an engagement. We were doing some sort of conference thing or just teaching thing, and I was standing at the back in worship, and God said, you need to seek out the 9 stones, the revelation of the 9 stones. And I thought, at that point I had no idea what he meant, but I set on a journey to find out what he meant, and as I've pursued that and then engaged it and then engaged the stones in terms of the fire stones and all those things, then the revelation of that with DNA and all became part of the governmental aspect of 12 being the fullness of government, and man as being called into agreement with God in government, so that we can be that agreement that opens that window for government to form. And I find it, I still find it just amazing, really, that God, being complete in himself, has chosen to include us in his eternal purpose to bring the fullness of that. So, you know, God has chosen that 9 isn't the fullness of government, but 12 is. And that means that we have to be part of that government, you know. So you have, you know, the 3 threes, you know, you need the last 3, which creates the 4th 3, if you like, which is the window that opens. So we bring agreement between heaven and earth, which is amazing, really, isn't it? Really, I have God looks at. We look at sometimes and think, you know, but He's called us to rule, and you know, to bring the whole of creation into that dimension. And what we're doing now is just preparing us for what's coming. You know, it is an awesome. I whenever I stand in God's heart, that's the I feel awe. I mean, that's the overwhelming feeling that I get and sense is just awe. It's awe-inspiring, just standing in eternity in that place, and it's just wondrous, you know, to engage in that. You know, so anyway, awesome. I better leave